Humans and Nature by Leslie Cross, updated 2023. Let us consider the second broad aspect of humanity's relationship with the world of other animals, the aspect by which we affect ourselves. Now, it cannot be denied that when two elements, be they human, animal, vegetable or mineral, have contact, the effect is inescapably mutual. That is, that by virtue of the contact between them, each is affected. According to the nature and intensity of the contact, so is the nature and intensity of the effect. There is no act which does not have some effect, and there is no act involving two or more elements which does not affect each of them. What, then, is the effect upon humanity of the nature and intensity of our contact with fellow creatures? It is, I submit, this: that by the creation and continued employment of a code of behaviour which is cruel, parasitical, and selfish, humans injure not only those upon whom we inflict our cruelties, our parasitical practices, and our selfishness, but we inflict restraints upon our own evolution by fastening ourselves as a parasite upon our fellow creatures. We create an anchor, as it were, at which the upward aspiring element in our nature drags in vain to be free. In specialized instances, of which the slaughterer are one example, they inflict upon this element not merely an inhibition, they drag it down in chains. It has been said by witnesses that in the shambles of Chicago, it is difficult to believe that the people whose daily work is perpetual killing have the spark of humanity left within them. If that is an extreme example, it is nevertheless a symbol of the depths to which human beings may sink as a result of fundamentally immoral behavior. In order to keep our thoughts largely upon the transcendental aspect of the relationship, I do not want to divert much attention to those physical results, which, though of relative importance, are in fact incidental. But it does need to be stated that, if one accepts that there is an order in the universe, it follows that ethical error cannot be scientific veracity. A number of diseases and ailments are no doubt traceable to ethical error, in that they are brought about or intensified by the consumption of foods which have an immoral basis, in that their production involves cruelty or violent death, or both. The coarse and heavy protein taken into the human body in the form of animal flesh and animal milk is a source of trouble, and it is significant that the incidence of cancer is highest in those parts of the earth where most animal milk is drunk. Milk-borne diseases are recognized even by those who take no account of the inevitable cruelties involved in dairying. Many indeterminate ailments may ultimately be traced at least in part to the use of immoral foods. There are, in addition, influences more subtle and less obvious than protein of the wrong kind. As a result of the terror which suffices many animals at the moment of death, the ductless glands pour secretions into the blood. These glands are in some ways the link between the psychical and physical nature of all animals, including human ones. For though their activation is primarily psychical, their effect is physical. The secretions aroused by terror cannot fail to affect adversely for us, the flesh which we ultimately consume. There are also further subtle influences only now beginning to be seriously studied, the non-physical or vibrational properties of food. While at the moment it would be unwise to base one's argument largely upon these studies, it is probably not irrelevant to connect the modern habit of pumping animal milk into school children with the revelation by more than one educational authority of a noticeable increase in mental dullness. Certainly, it is not irrelevant to set against this the clear evidence that one of the characteristics of vegan children who do not take animal milk in any form is outstanding mental alertness. In the sphere of fundamental principle, we have to consider the violence which is inevitable in the existing relationship. If violence, with its culminating peak in war, is undesirable, it is so because it is the principle withholding us from the attainment of higher and purer states of being. If violence among humans is undesirable, how much less desirable is violence done by humanity to utterly helpless creatures? Again, the cheapness of human life cannot, in a complete analysis, be separated from the cheapness of animal life. The only sin, said Emerson, is limitation. We err, and we err greatly, when we limit the application of abiding principles to one section of the world's inhabitants. Animals share with us the habitation of this globe, and they are as entitled as we to the benefits of a natural and developmental evolution. We, who might learn much from them, and who might with love aid them in their evolution, offer them not love, not even tolerance, but a philosophy which is exemplified by the steel of the slaughterer's knife and of the bit in the horse's mouth. We conduct against them a war of aggression even less principled than the wars between humans. Truly, whoever says they love peace cannot love peace wholly if they turn upon their fellow creatures in an act of slaughter. One of the experiences of one who humbly and deeply seeks the truth is that when higher feelings pervade our minds, we are unable to confine their application to the human race alone. When Paul Bruton, writing of humanity, refers to the immeasurable infinite that pervades his measurable being, he goes on to say that it speaks to him of his oneness with all that lives, whether in the human or animal kingdom, and hence inculcates the primary duty of universal compassion. In the sphere of positive evidence, there are those rare but revealing glimpses of the way in which our evolution is aided as a result of the reformed relationship with nature. Humans have somehow slipped in this relationship, with undesirable consequences to both nature and humanity. We are out of tune with nature. We bear a relationship to her which might be likened to a geographical fault. If we could return to our rightful place, if we could approach her as a friend and a lover instead of as a dissecting botanist and a murderous oppressor, the resultant harmony would constitute a tremendous and incalculable evolutionary gain. One of those rare occasions when this has taken place is described by Adams Beck in his book The House of Fulfillment. By an act of unpremeditated love, the author found himself in momentary friendship with the wild creatures in a Himalayan forest. He never had, he says, a pleasure so pure and selfless as that perfect trust of a wild thing. It was a high point in his evolution, and while it lasted, it overwhelmed him with an intensity of feeling whose effect never left him. Does it seem much, he asks, to spring from a small cause? How can I tell? I knew in that moment that I would break truce no more. Those bold, bright eyes looked up into mine, and my shooting days were done. We cannot, even if we would, escape our kinship with all that lives. We may violate it, as we do, but in the end we shall learn that the price of violation is not paid by the animals alone, but also the soul of humanity. The Surge of Freedom by Leslie J. Cross, 1954. Updated 2023. This is an attempt to state in simple terms what veganism is and why and how it came into existence, and to suggest what it could mean for humanity. The word veganism is a symbol that stands for a major change, a new mutation comparable to the freeing of the serfs and the freeing of the slaves. Its official definition, the doctrine that humanity should live without exploiting or oppressing other animals, is accurate, precise, and comprehensive, but not always fully understood. This is not as surprising as it might seem, for rarely have 12 short words enshrined a reform so massive, the achievement of which could bring a new world and a new community to inhabit it. Why do we believe we should live without exploiting sentient life? To put the question in another form, why was such a doctrine formulated? The final, if not the immediate answer, is a revealing one, for it demonstrates the truth of the claim that veganism is not a mere side shoot in human evolution, but a central extending growth of considerable significance. Veganism owes its birth to the fact that at the deepest point within us, we believe impregnably in freedom. Freedom to live our own lives in our own way, according to our own inward light, is fundamental to our view of life itself. It is the light of this concept that we find the true significance of the vegan reform. Only when we see it as a doctrine, not of restriction, as those who oppose it mistakenly believe, but of freedom, do we fully comprehend it. The simple fact is this, that at rock bottom, veganism is the most recent of the periodic surges which have marked the tide of freedom ever since history began. It is distinguished from its predecessors by virtue of the fact that it brings a quite new and distinctive feature into the long fight for liberty. It has driven the tide of freedom beyond what has hitherto been held to be its natural boundary, the concept of the free human. Until the advent of veganism, comparatively few regarded the animals as being either worthy of or entitled to the right to be free. And probably fewer still realised the impressive effect which the granting of such a right would have upon the freedom of humans themselves. The real, the indelible significance of veganism is its devastatingly logical demonstration that by denying other animals the right to be free, we keep ourselves locked against the gateway to our further pursuit of happiness. To believe in the right to be free means inevitably that we grant the same right to others. If we fail in this, we deny the principle itself. We thus make of Orwell's 1984 a logical possibility, and the slavery of one human to another a justifiable act. To put it in another way, the law of freedom, which is also the law of love, knows no limits. Because the human mind has excluded other animals from its operation, we have set arbitrary limits upon it, and in so doing have reaped what we have sown, a severe limitation upon our own progress. It is upon this factor, this little recognised bar to the upward growth of humanity, that veganism throws such a ruthless and revealing light. When we turn to the question of how veganism came into the world, we find an excellent example of the indirect approach which the forces of destiny sometimes adopt. The mundane fact that the seed of veganism grew out of a year's argument in the correspondence columns of the Vegetarian Messenger about the moral case against the use of dairy produce by vegetarians. At the end of the correspondence, a handful of vegetarians decided they would like to form themselves into a non-dairy group within the Vegetarian Society. But the society declined and suggested that these few members should set up an organisation of their own. Thus was the Vegetarian Society the unwitting handmaid of destiny, for the direct result of its action was the formation of the Vegan Society in November 1944. The new society was not long content with being merely non-flesh, non-dairy, non-egg, non-honey. Commodities such as fur, leather and wool joined animal food as being non-vegan. There was an early attempt to get at the root of what is wrong with the relationship between humans and other animals, to deal with the cause rather than its almost uncountable effects. However, not without some years of internal stress and strain was the society able to be precise about what it wanted to do. It made up its mind finally on November the 11th, 1950, when it was agreed in a special general meeting that what it wanted to do was end the human exploitation and oppression of other animals. Between 1944 and 1950, the inner and true meaning of veganism was held in solution, undefined and incompletely recognised. The non-dairy motivation was from the start clearly insufficient as a final meaning. It was in fact no more than the trigger movement that impelled a new and profound truth into the world. In 1950, when the meaning of veganism became generally apparent, it was formulated into a simple phrase which was inserted into the society's constitution. Since 1950, there has been no doubt as to its meaning. The short definition quoted in the early part of the article is amplified by Rule 4A. The society shall seek to end the use of other animals by humans for food, commodities, work, hunting, vivisection, and all of the uses involving exploitation of animal life by humanity. Although prior to 1950, there was a good deal of argument as to what veganism in fact was. One thing was never in doubt: the impelling power behind the movement was and remains compassion for other animals, arising out of their treatment at the hands of humanity. It was compassion that led the first handful to band together in 1944, and it is compassion that provides the motive power today. As a society, an important part of our work is to bring to the notice of people everywhere something which might otherwise escape their attention: the all-around importance of animal liberation. Animals present humans with the supreme test of our worthiness and ability to advance, the test of how we behave towards those over whom we possess power. It is sad but true that in the face of this test, more often than not, we seek our own ends at the cost of the suffering to other animals. We hunt, slaughter, vivisect and enslave them. To obtain their milk, we inflict upon them some of the least worthy of all our exploitations, the deliberate and forcible separation of mother cow from baby calf. We take the wild, free and noble horse, break, castrate and harness them. Our constant prayers are not so much for daily bread, but for daily flesh. The compassionate human may well be excused for asking pointedly what kind of relationship this can be, that has for its symbols the whip and the bit and the slaughterer's knife. The American writer Henry Bailey Stevens has argued that one of the wrong turnings taken by humanity somewhere in our evolution was the enslavement, domestication of other animals. The contention is to say the least logical. There is not much common sense, for example, in asking for peace on earth and at the same time prosecuting what amounts to war upon the animals. What is needed to begin with to correct this evolutionary deviation is acceptance of the idea that animal emancipation is a desirable aim. If a sufficient number of people experience such a mental conversion, then human skills and ingenuity could be used to develop alternatives to those products of animal origin which the majority undoubtedly believe essential to their well-being. These products, a completely satisfactory non-animal milk is an example, are necessary if the universal practical application of the ideal is to be achieved. For individuals are not all alike, and there are many for whom the practical obstacles must at present seem insurmountable. We cannot shut our eyes to the undoubted fact that to such people, such obstacles are real and not imaginary. In order to provide the vegan movement with sufficient resources and skill, it is vital to attract people to it. The most immediate method is the spreading of the idea of animal emancipation. We shall welcome converts of whatever degree, those who can promise no more than mental acceptance equally with those who faithfully and so far as they are able put their acceptance of the ideal into daily practice. As the idea becomes more and more accepted, opportunities will grow to make the path easier and more attractive for those whose nature is not that of the pioneer. Concurrent with the gradual removal of obstacles to one's personal practice, attention will have to be given to the question of how we propose to deal with animals in general as soon as the changeover from exploitation to freedom reaches a certain stage. It is not difficult to see that such a changeover will bring with it problems of a wide and general character. No one, least of all the vegan, wants a world without animals, and how in general and in detail we propose to effect the swingover from exploitation and perversion to freedom and naturalness will be quite a talking point one fine day. If I may intrude a personal observation, there is little more desirable I would ask of the Providence than that such a day should dawn while I am still here to experience it. How glorious, for example, to take part in a discussion to decide whether, for the purposes of the changeover, a nature park or an animal sanctuary should be set up in this or that part of the country, and exactly how it should be planned. When veganism reaches such a stage, there will have been an immense change of heart and in mind of the majority of humanity. The idea of exploiting animals would be as repugnant then as the idea of human slavery is today. Some of the changes in daily living are obvious. There will, for example, be no butcher shops, and the dairy milk delivery service, if such a thing still exists, will be delivering vegan milk. The countryside will not be heavy with the anguish of cows crying for their calves. There will be no slaughterhouses, no vivisection laboratories, no one will hunt animals for fun. But some of the changes are not so obvious. The benefits to us of living in a kindlier and more enlightened world can be envisaged only in broadest outline. Our health, physical and mental, will be vastly improved because we will have shed a great deal of the coarser part of our nature. Benefits of the spirit will shower upon us, benefits which today, by our own short-sighted volition, will deny ourselves. Such is the stuff of dreams. To make them true requires that we play our part as it comes to us. We are in the very elementary stages of a new mutation. We are the pioneers.